Jesus is speaking to his disciples very near the end of his time with them prior to the crucifixion. As if he says, starting in verse 9, I love you just as the Father loves me. Remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My commandment is this: love one another just as I love you. The greatest love you can have for your friends is to give your life for them. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because servants do not know what their master is doing. Instead, I call you friends, because I have told you everything I heard from my Father. You did not choose me. I chose you and appointed you to go and bear much fruit, the kind of fruit that endures. And so the Father will give you whatever you ask of him in my name. This then is what I command you: love one another. May God add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of the word. Well, for somebody my age, I was a pretty early adapter to Facebook. It was all the way back in 2008, my computer tells me, that I joined Facebook. And I remember at the time I was feeling a little bit silly. I was about 50 years old, feeling a little silly joining this thing. Was that at that point was primarily populated by young people. In fact, the real reason I joined Facebook initially was not because I was interested in participating in that form of social media. I became a member of Facebook simply because my then 14-year-old daughter Emily had a Facebook page, and I wanted to know what she was doing with it. Now, maybe you've had this experience. I know a lot of you are, some of you are on Facebook, some of you aren't. And I hope that I'm able to explain for those who are not familiar with Facebook enough so that this makes sense to you. But maybe some of you who are on Facebook experience what I did. When I first created my page, what I found was that just sort of grabbed my attention right away was that all these people were waiting to be my friend. People I hadn't spoken to for years were waiting for me to be their friends. And then after that, I started getting friend requests. And I learned that I could make friend requests of other people. And I said, wow, this is kind of cool. It felt very affirming to have people request to be my friend. Usually we're not so, especially here in New England, we're not usually so formal about it. You know, we just sort of become friends. And you're not even sure sometimes, especially in New England, I can say that as a Midwesterner, whether somebody actually likes you or not. You know? So it's kind of nice to have somebody say, I want to be your friend. It's sort of nice to have somebody say, well, I accept your friend request. And so I really kind of got into it and still do. Oh, by the way, we have a Facebook page for the Norfolk United Methodist Church. We are at 99 likes. If you want to join our Facebook page, you can do it, and you can be the 100th person to like our Facebook video. Anyway, so as I say, I wasn't prepared for that to like it, but I thought it was pretty cool after a while, especially since I got to reconnect with some long lost friends. Now, one of the things about Facebook is that you get to choose your friends. Like I said, if somebody makes a friend request, you don't have to accept it. Furthermore, if you want to, you can easily and rather sneakily, I found out, unfriend someone who you don't want to have as a friend anymore. See, if you unfriend somebody, so if you don't do Facebook, they don't send a message to that person that you've unfriended them. You just disappear from their network. And anyway, so you can accept a friend request, or somebody can accept your friend request. You can unfriend them, or they can unfriend you. It works both ways. And so this is a kind of an interesting definition of friendship. It's friendship-like, you might say. Contrast that to the message we heard just a few moments ago from Jesus. Listen again to what he says to his disciples. Now, I don't have my clicker, so if you could bring me to the next slide here. He says, I do not call you servants any longer, because servants do not know what their master is doing. Now, Jesus says to his disciples, instead, I call you friends, because I have told you everything from my Father. That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Jesus has sending you a friend request. He wants to be in relationship with you. He wants to forgive you and to accept you as you are, and then begin to work to help you become all that you were meant to be. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it? We've received a friend request from Jesus. But here's the kicker. In the next verse, he says this. If we could get to the next one. You did not choose me. I chose you. So it's a little different, isn't it, than Facebook? You don't. It might feel like you've been sent a friend request from Jesus, but actually, according to him, the friend request always comes from him first. He chooses, and then we choose whether we're going to accept that choice. The friend request always comes from God. The Bible tells us this, that we love God because God first loved us. But there's more. It's not just that Jesus friends us. He also friends a whole lot of other people too. And unlike Facebook, when we become part of Jesus' network of friends, we automatically become friends with all the other people he chooses to include. And while we might try to, we can never unfriend them. And they can't unfriend us. All kinds of people. We don't really have a choice. A friend of Jesus is a friend of ours, no matter whether we like them or not. In some ways, it's more like a family than it is a circle of friends. You know what I'm talking about. You know, your family. Think about it. Everybody has a weird family. Everybody's family is a motley crew. That's at least my perception. You know, we've all got somebody like creepy Uncle Morty, or bratty little sister Susie, or the obnoxious and overbearing brother Bob, or embarrassing Aunt Esther. You know what I'm talking about. Lots of us wish we could maybe choose a different family, or that we could disown some of our family members. It doesn't work like that, however. We're stuck with them. That also means that they're stuck with us. What if we could choose? Not just our families, but our faith family. What if we could choose who got in and who got out? So what would the church look like? I suspect it would look a lot like us, right? In other words, if I could choose everybody in the church, you'd probably all sort of look like me. Thankfully for you, that's not the case. But you know, we kind of look alike and talk alike and act alike, right? To some degree, at least. I was thinking about this, and I remembered a powerful story that was told back in 2008 on my favorite radio program. The fact that I remember it nearly 10 years later is how to tell you the impact it made on me. A powerful story on my favorite radio program, This American Life. Any This American Life? Wonderful program on NPR. It was told by a woman named Elna Baker, who was hired by the famous Manhattan toy store, FAO Schwarz, to work in their doll department. Now, FAO Schwarz is kind of an upscale toy store, and so, of course, they don't just sell any dolls. American Girl dolls aren't even good enough for them. They sell dolls from what is called the Lee Middleton collection. Lee Middleton dolls were very special. We were told that the workers were told that they were made out of materials developed by NASA. And they look exactly like real babies, and they are weighted in the head and in the bottom so that they actually flop like real babies. And here's a picture of them to tell you how realistic they look. These are dolls, And you'll see that they don't, when you go to see the showroom, this is what they look like. They're all in their own little incubators. And so what happens is customers come into the FAO Schwartz Lee Middleton room. It's actually a little cottage that's built like that. The workers, the salespeople at FAO Schwartz, they don't really act like regular salespeople. They're more like actors. And in the case of those who work at the Lee Middleton Doll Collection, they have to wear nursing uniforms. And you walk along and you look at all the babies in the incubator, and you pick one out that you would like to adopt. And then they go and they take you into another room and they give you an adoption interview. And make you promise that you're going to feed the child and read to it. And if you agree to all of those things, then they sign an adoption certificate for you. And they make a big deal out of this. Now, when Baker first came on board, things were kind of slow. But then something happened that blew everything up. There were two girls from an MTV reality show who showed up at the store with camera crews in tow, and they adopted a Lee Middleton doll. And the episode that showed them doing this, and that was shown a little bit later on, and when it was shown in mid-November, the response was immediate. Within a week, FAO Schwartz had sold out all of their white babies. And since the factory was back ordered and there was no chance of getting more, FAO Schwartz was panicking because Christmas was just about to come. And here they were with no white babies. There was all that were left were Asian, Hispanic, and black baby dolls. Here's where the story gets interesting. Here's how Baker describes what she saw over and over again when well-heeled white people realized that there were no more white babies for their daughters. Day after day, the same scenario would repeat itself. Eager mothers would rush to the adoption center. Is this the Lee Middleton doll collection, they'd ask? Then they'd stop dead in their tracks. I'd watch their heads go from incubator to incubator. They'd pause briefly at the Asian baby. Oh, no. And then, trying as hard as they could to be politically correct, the mothers would look at us and say, "You have any other shades of baby?" Ms. Baker continues, "Well, technically, we hadn't sold out of all the white babies. Technically, we still had one left. A red-headed, green-eyed factory reject whose oversized head weighed at least 5 pounds more than all the other babies' heads and whose fingers had somehow been fused so that it looked like the baby had flippers. The salespeople had nicknamed it Nubbins, and when you picked up Nubbins up, his head would automatically flop back and his little flippers would flip up like a monster baby. Because of his deformities, Nubbins was used strictly for display and was carried around and changed and fussed over by the salespeople/nurses." Says Ms. Baker, "As a result, when mothers would rush to the adoption center and realize there were only minority babies, they'd immediately notice Nubbins. They'd spot him in our arms, round and pudgy with a head of red hair. He was the answer to their prayers. 'Can I see that baby?' they would insist, and all we ever had to do was turn Nubbins around. His head would flop back. His flippers would flip up, and the mothers would quickly say, 'Never mind.' This happened so often that eventually us nurses," says Baker, "decided to make a bet. Who do you think will go first, baby Nubbins or all the minority babies?" Ms. Baker bet that all the minority babies would sell before Nubbins, the monster baby doll. What happened was more complicated and more troubling. As Christmas approached, slowly the minority babies began to sell. They sold in a particular order. Can you guess what that order would be? First, the Asian babies were sold. Then they sold out all the Hispanic babies. And finally, all that was left was Nubbins and incubators of black baby dolls. The bet was modified. It became, who do you think will go first, Nubbins or every black baby in the nursery? Baker stood by her initial bet. We'll never sell Nubbins, she insisted. She goes on a week later. A mother marched up to the adoption center. Nurse, she yelled, is this some sort of joke? Her face was frozen in disgust. In one hand, she was holding a Bergdorf shopping bag. With the other, she was dragging a very solemn child. Where are all the white babies? I wasn't used to the mothers being quite so direct. We're all out, I said. You've got to be kidding, she began. And then her eyes focused on Nubbins, who was nestled in my arm. What about that one, she asked. I turned Nubbins around slowly for full impact. His head flopped back, his flippers flipped up. I waited for her horrified response. We'll take it, she said. Baker was stunned. She says, after all the weird comments from our customers about our baby inventory, I still didn't want to face what it said if a factory reject monster baby was adopted before a whole nursery of perfectly cute black babies. Maybe it's a good thing that God doesn't let us choose. Because when it's left up to us, we act a lot like the customers at FAO Schwartz. We think a church is something that you shop for. And all too often what that means is that we look for a church with people who look like us and act like us, a place where we can be comfortable and never challenged, where everything that's said we will agree with, and everybody is kind of on the same page. And we have plenty of local churches to choose from, so we're certain to find one that will fit for us. In my experience, however, God has the last laugh. Because even in a church full of people just like us, we're bound to run into somebody who rubs us the wrong way, who drives us crazy, or who offends us, or who we find ourselves judging. I was appalled, as I'm sure many of you are, when I read recently about the church that refused to baptize a child because their adoptive parents were gay. The rector of the cathedral had met with the couple and had agreed to baptize their child. The couple even had started coming to the church, and they had attended the baptism classes. But then 3 days before the baptism was to take place, the rector called the parents up to say that there had been pushback from some of the members of the church, and that the baptism, at least for now, had been postponed. Where do we get off thinking that we have a choice as to who God lets into God's church? You did not choose me. I chose you, remember? Haven't we picked up by now that God uses a different set of criteria than we do when he makes his choices? And if Jesus is the one doing the choosing, that means we don't get to pick and choose. It also means that his choices do not conform to our preferences, our prejudices, our expectations. In other words, you can pretty well bet that if there's someone you don't think belongs, who you're inclined to judge or dismiss or avoid, it's a good bet that that's the very person that Jesus has chosen to be your family friend. And since he's inclined to pick just about anybody, to not be too picky about who he chooses, the safest bet for all of us is to treat everyone as if they were a friend of Jesus. And by extension, a friend of ours, a member of a family. As a friend of Jesus, we have only one choice, really, when it comes to how we relate to every single person we encounter. It is not to judge them. It is not to make them feel inferior. It is not to let them know that we think that they are a special class of sinner. It is not to categorize them. It is not to divide between who are the supposedly deserving poor and the supposedly undeserving poor. It is not to judge them. It is not to do any of those things. Our choice really is to love them. We don't have any other choice because according to Jesus, we don't get to choose. He's the chooser and not us. He's the friend requester, not us. Some of you are familiar with Zan Holmes. He's the guy who was the host of the Disciple Bible Study videos. Wonderful preacher. He tells the story of a family gathering where they were taking family pictures, and all sorts of pictures were taken of all sorts of permutations. At the end of this gathering, Xander realized he didn't have a picture with everybody in the family in it, and so he called for everybody's attention. He says, okay, now I've got one more last picture we need to take. I want everyone in this one. We had a little nephew who heard him say that, and that nephew ran outside of the house and into the neighborhood and started inviting everyone he saw over to the house to be in the picture. I like that kid. He understands something that maybe we too often forget, that when Jesus says, whosoever will, let them come, he's like Xander's nephew. He means everyone. And so may it be said of us. Lord, help